the outset, I want to say at the outset to obviously to both of you, and I want to talk about it a little bit, but not at the beginning. Obviously, to see Israel and Israelis deal with such pain is, I know, upsetting to a lot of Americans. We're not in Israel, of course, by definition, but it's just upsetting. Obviously, the murder of these 6 hostages, and it feels like when it was announced, which was Saturday night here, it feels like probably the worst day since October 7th. I would like to talk about Israeli society a bit and how Israelis, but I want to do that. It seemed right after this was announced, it seemed, at least here in the U.S., but we saw this in Israel also. The focus seemed immediately about is who to blame for this, and you had President Biden saying, I think it was on Monday, is Prime Minister Netanyahu doing enough for a ceasefire? And he said, no, you have thousands of Israelis demonstrating. I can't remember, you would remember, I guess it was Sunday night, pushing for a ceasefire. And there was a lot of focus on this issue of why there hadn't been a ceasefire. And it seems, and I'm going to turn to you, General Amidror, first. I want to talk about how you see why there hasn't been a ceasefire yet. I want to, and then I'm going to get into some detail about what is apparently the ceasefire agreements that the Israel had agreed to before were. But before I get into some of these details, I just want to ask your general view about how you assess the narrative turning immediately. Why hadn't Israel already agreed to a ceasefire? If they had agreed, suggested these 6 wouldn't have been killed. And then we'll get into some detail about it.
I think that, first of all, good evening. I think that it is very significant for understanding that the Israeli society now. There is kind of an argument between 2 groups. One is saying what the most important goal of the war now is to eradicate Hamas. And yes, we have to take risks relating to the hostages. And anyhow, if we give the hostages, we will see another 7th of October, not now, 3 years from now, because we will not finish the job. The other group, which is those who are demonstrating against the government, they are making a lot of noises, but I don't think that they have a real majority in the Israeli society. I think it's a 50-50. They are saying here there is immediate risk to the hostages. It's clear. We don't have any more evidence. If you don't do it now, we are losing them. And maybe you are right, maybe you are wrong about the future. It is something which is unknown. So let's do something which for sure is saving the hostages, to whom we have huge obligation. We didn't succeed to fulfill our commitment to the citizens of Israel to defend them. And many of them had been abdicated from their houses near the border. And anyhow, all of them are going to lose their life if we don't do it now. And about the future, we will find solutions. We will say that we have to go back, and we will go back, and now it will be easier because Hamas is not as strong. So let's do something which is needed immediately, now. And the Israeli society, there are many nows. There is Mashiach now, there is peace now, there is solution to the hostages now, and now is very popular word in the Israeli society, because Israelis don't have too much patience and they want a solution now. It is clear that if you don't do it now, probably many of them will lose their life. So this is the argument. What is more important, what is more urgent, and what are the prices that should be paid for saving the hostages and so on and so forth. I think that at the end, the Israeli society will find a way to overcome this very strong conflict within the society. The problem is that in a way it became a political issue because those who are pro now are saying that Bibi is doing it or not doing it because he has some personal issues, and those who are against it are saying you are using it just an excuse to get rid of Bibi. You want to get rid of Bibi. You didn't succeed to do it in democratic elections. So you find many reasons in the last 3 years, from corruption, submarines, whatever, and slowly, now it's the hostages. It's not real. It's only because the political view that you have about Bibi and the government. And when it is becoming political, it's about sects, and now no one is ready to hear the other side argument. It's very problematic. But if I can judge it from the outside, both sides have very strong argument. If we do now the ceasefire, probably we will not finish the job, and Hamas will reorganize within a year or 2 or 3, I don't know. And we will have to face the problem then. And it's true that if we don't make the release of the hostages immediately, probably many of them will lose their life. Now, with the new orders that Hamas gave to his people, that if the IDF is closing, they should kill the hostages. It's clear that that will be the result. So it's 2 bad options, and each of the Israelis decision makers have to make a decision based on the circumstances, knowing that it is 2 bad alternatives.
Okay, General Ayish, thank you, General Amidror. General Ayish, again, before we get into details about the ceasefire negotiation, do you see it broadly like General Amidror does, or do you see it a little different?
Well, I would not be dragged into the political discussion. Let me go back to the strategic goals defined by the Israeli government for this war. One of them is to eliminate Hamas. The second one is to release the hostages. And the third one is to restore security to allow the villages and the residents to be back at their home. So in terms of strategic goals, we are not achieving a significant one, which is the hostages. And it seems like we are not doing enough to create the right conditions to achieve this goal. Now, the first one who is responsible for that is Sinwar. And we have to bear it in mind. We are dealing here with a terrorist who is, killing 6 hostages just before we are arriving to rescue them. And at the same 3 days after, the UK government is declaring restrictions and a ban on export certain elements, defense elements to Israel. Think about it. This is unbelievable. Yeah. But we should remember that the villain here is Sinwar. And having said that, what General Amidror described regarding the Israeli internal argument about priorities and how to do it is a very strong and a very powerful one. And this is a part of our Israeli ethos. Going back to 11, we released 1,027 terrorists out of Israeli jails. Yeah. To release 1 hostages, Gilad Shalit, only 1, to include Sinwar that was released. So we should bear it and keep it in mind. It's very complicated, very complicated. I'm not sure that you can easily decide who is wrong and who is right, if there is wrong and right. but we have to do whatever it takes, you know, to fulfill those missions. And one of them is the hostages. And this is before we start talking about the linkage between Gaza and the north and the other fronts that we are facing at the moment. Last word, which I think a bit different than General Amidror. General Amidror was talking about Messiah now and things now. We are talking about 11 months. Even if someone is saying now, it's already 11 months that we are in war.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, and I want to follow up something with General Ayish on this. You know, in the discussion, and then we'll get in again. I'll get into detail in a second, but you know, this has been reported for weeks. We've talked about it on previous webinars. The so-called, what is referred to as the security establishment or senior military people say, look, you know, they seem to be more pushing for maybe taking certain risks that it seems like that maybe Prime Minister Netanyahu and some other cabinet ministers aren't willing to do. And I wonder if, and maybe it's hard to psychoanalyze obviously from a distance or at all, but do you have a sense, General Ayish, that the security establishment feels maybe an extra acute sense of guilt about what happened in October 7th and about the hostages, so they want to maybe are prepared to take certain more risks? And getting to what you just said, maybe Netanyahu, and it doesn't get mentioned enough, what you just mentioned, although Brett Stevens talked about in his column, I think yesterday in the New York Times, which was, I refer everybody to, which I thought was very good. But he talks about the Shalit deal, right? And as you point out, there are over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners that was released, one of which was Sinwar, all for one Israeli hostage, Gilad Shalit, who had become his freedom had become like a cause celeb in Israel, and he had been stuck there, unfortunately not stuck, abducted there for 5 years in Gaza. And that Netanyahu might be thinking about that almost more than anything, and that's stuck in his mind because he was the prime minister that made that deal, and it was probably one of the worst deals that Israel has made. I just wonder, like, how you see if, and I don't mean to divide the world between the, let's say, the military leaders and Netanyahu, but it does seem like they're pitted in different ways against each other here, and maybe they're both kind of haunted by different things, and that's partly what's driving it.
I think it makes sense. You know, they better be haunted and disturbed and feeling this sense of guilt. They have every reason for that after October 7th. Having said that, it's really hard, you know, to go into hearts and minds of people and understand what is behind it. What we clearly can say is that the responsibility relies on the Israeli government. So at the end of the day, it's going to be the decision of the Israeli government. The Israeli prime minister is leading it, and they will have to decide. All the others can recommend, you know, the Mossad, the Shabak, the IDF. It's fine. They can sit there, discuss, bring their recommendations. The responsibility and the decision is going to rely with the Israeli government.
Okay, let me turn to talk about General Amidror. I want to talk about the focus on some of the ceasefire talks that has been a focus that Netanyahu, and there was a cabinet meeting, I believe, last Thursday that had gotten very heated, and it seems like all these cabinet meetings, the content gets leaked very quickly, and you had, I think, a cabinet vote of 8-1, and about and I think it was a key issue was the Philadelphi Corridor. And Nolan, could we put up a map, by the way, while we're talking about Philadelphia Corridor for a second? Okay, thank you. This is just a simple map here. It's the Philadelphia Corridor, which we've talked about in many of our previous webinars. It delineates the border between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, and Israel, of course, when they control Gaza, had controlled it, but then when they disengaged in 2005, they'd stopped. And we had also, Nolan also showed the picture what we just found online of the corridor also, and then we'll come back to this one. So, okay, so you see it's like a fence and there's that paved area right in front, like a little buffer area. And then you have the buildings just a bit back from them. Okay, let's go back to the other one, Nolan, for a second, please. Thank you. General Amidror, so one of the issues, and Netanyahu gave, I think, like a 25-minute explanation about why Israel needed to retain the Philadelphi Corridor. Reportedly, this is one of the key issues that, at least from the U.S. side, explains. Again, this is from one side, explains why there hasn't been agreement. Of course, we thought we've had agreements before, and Hamas has repeatedly rejected them. You've had the U.S. and Israel on one side a number of times, and Hamas says no, even though they thought they had an agreement. Setting that aside, from the U.S. side, the Philadelphia Corridor seems to be apparently a big stumbling block, and that Netanyahu gave a full explanation about this, I think in Hebrew and in English. I watched the English version. It was like 25 minutes. And why? Because that the Philadelphia Corridor, that we've learned that there have been all these tunnels underneath, and I guess from overland before the war. And thank you, Nolan. Yeah, one tunnel that they discovered, it was so big that this vehicle was able to pass through there. That was a key supply area, and that we can't allow, that Israel cannot allow to that area to be allowed to resupply Hamas again. And I think the discussion is, and I'm sorry, it's a long question. This is about the second phase of the agreement. At least in Ron Dermer, the Minister of Strategic Affairs, a former JINSA distinguished fellow, was reported the other day as saying first phase, Israel controls it. Second phase, while they're negotiating things for the second phase, but in the second phase, there could be a discussion. There could be a discussion for the second phase of who controls it, but at least in the first phase, Israel needs to control. You have people saying that this, based on reports, that apparently, again, based on press reports, I don't know if they're true, that some of the security folks say you could put up, and we talked about this the other week, that maybe you could put sensors and different things. Maybe Israel doesn't need to man them, and Israel will come back if needed to close this if Hamas violates and starts trying to resupply that way. I don't know, where do you, and we talked about this, but I think in light of what's happened in the last week, I think it's worth discussing again. What are your thoughts about this issue?
I think that the details, with all due respect, is not the issue. Okay. This is 14-kilometer long corridor. Hamas had 3 sources or 4 sources of abilities to attack Israel. One is to smuggle in weapons from Egypt, either under the ground or on the ground to the Rafah crossing, where it's when in our map, it's not far from where it was written Philadelphi Corridor. This is 2 sources of military capabilities. Smuggle it from Egypt through the tunnels or through the passage. The third one is to buy in Israel innocent materials and to use it to build what they did. For example, there are rumors here that part of the machinery that they had inside was bought in Israel as an old parts of all the factories in Israel, and they renew it and use it to produce, and so on. The fourth source is self-production inside Gaza. During the war, we probably succeeded to destroy most, if not all, the production centers of both Islamic Jihad and Hamas. I don't know if somewhere there is something remote, but probably the whole system in which they produce mainly rockets and missiles, we probably succeeded to destroy. Now they have, and from Israel now they cannot buy anything. So now, if they will be disconnected to Egypt by Israeli IDF presence in the corridor, trying to prevent it from above, on the ground, and under the ground tunnels, slowly, the capabilities of Hamas will be eroded, and Hamas will not have the capability to produce substitute to what is losing in the battlefield or launching. If they can launch from time to time, they have probably a few hundreds missiles, rockets inside the Gaza Strip. So from the Israeli point of view, it is necessary to be there to prevent, to smuggle in whatever they want to smuggle, because that will prevent them from rebuild what they had in the past. And here it's an argument about how can you trust the technology, or if you have the technology, what after the first 7 hostages will be released, you will go inside and stop the process. Do you see an Israeli leader who can do it to stop the process in the middle before the 10 days in which they're supposed to give another 3 hostages? So I think that the Prime Minister doesn't believe that Israel will go back. And we had many promises in the past that, remember when Ehud Barak retreated from Lebanon, he said, we will blow it, we will go back. When Arik Sharon retreated from Gaza, he said the same. When Rabin said about after Oslo, if it will be a problem, we will be back. We came back to do something after we had 122 people killed inside Israel by terrorists coming from the West Bank. Only then, when it was Arik Sharon, we overcome all the problems which came through the Oslo Agreement. So we have an history in which we are promising to ourselves, but in reality, we don't do it. Why? America, our society, our domestic issues, politics, whatever. And Israel, at the end of the day, is a sensitive society in which if the Americans are saying, now you don't do it, I don't see many prime ministers who are saying, I heard you, Mr. President, but I'm going tomorrow morning to do it. And it is the interest of the Americans that we will not violate the agreement. Even if we identify, according to our position and knowledge, if we identify violation of the agreement by Hamas. So do you believe, all of you, that the day after Israel will be there? I'm not sure. Anyhow, this is the issue. How far can we trust the agreement? We know that we cannot trust the Egyptians, that we learned through the history. So how much we can trust the technology, how much we can trust our intelligence that will tell us here they are violating it, and if you believe that if that happens, Israel will be back. I think that the Prime Minister is more so pessimistic about it than the military, maybe because of their guilt, but I think more than that, because he understands better than them how pressure from the outside looks. They are not those who are taking the burden of the American pressure. He is taking it, and he understands what does it mean. Yeah. So I'm not here. I didn't say who is right and who is wrong, but it's very important to understand that those who are against it have very strong arguments, and those who are for it have very strong arguments. The first is about security and the ability of Israel to live afterwards. The second view, based on the assumption that if we don't do it now, we will lose the hostages. Yeah. And it's probably true.
Oh, yeah, I'll add, I mentioned Bret Stephens' column yesterday. And
I didn't read it. Someone recommended to read it. I didn't read it.
Oh, I'll send it to you. I recommend it. I recommend to our audience. I mean, I always think it's good to read Bret. I think he's always very thoughtful. But I think here, especially this week, well, certainly when the American media, the mainstream media at least, and he writes for the New York Times, has been, heavily skewed, criticizing Netanyahu. He says, look, he clearly put himself in the camp. He says, once Israel agrees to leave this corridor, they're not coming back. It's a fantasy to think. And he cited some of the examples that you did, General Amidror. By the way, apparently Tom Friedman, also in the New York Times, who I don't think he wrote anything. He gave some audio interview or something. I haven't listened to it, but he thinks he ascribes, not surprisingly, all sorts of nefarious motives to Netanyahu here. He's trying to hurt the U.S. election and interfere in the U.S. election, stand in the way of Harris getting elected. I don't know. I haven't.
So do you believe that there is one American which will vote for Trump or Harris because of Philadelphia?
No, but I do think that Biden saying this at the same day when Israel was burying these hostages, I think it was noted, at least folks in the American Jewish community. I also think it was interesting that got some press here or got some attention here is actually Vice President Harris put out a very tough statement. I thought initially, I think it was Sunday, stronger than the statement that Biden made. She hasn't verbally said anything. She put out a written statement. And then her vice presidential candidate was asked about it, and he was at a state fair or some fair in Minnesota, and I think he just walked away and didn't answer. Then he put out a written statement after he was criticized for that. I think people notice those kind of things, and the Jewish vote, I think, will matter in certain states, particularly Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. But we'll see. Let me ask you, General Ayish, and I was talking to my colleague John Hanna about this, and he was looking over, what was one of the arguments and have made, and I was asked by a journalist about this. Well, if this was so important in Philadelphia Corridor, how come Netanyahu didn't mention it before, or more until more recently? And there was this Biden's May 31st proposal, talks about that the U.S. that Israel agreed to, talks about Israeli withdrawal in phase 1, I think, from populated areas. Now, that's the quote, populated areas. Now, it doesn't really define what they are. I believe I was reading an interview with Ron Dermer, I think it was in yesterday or the day before, and he said, look, Israel's going to maintain control of the Philadelphia Corridor in phase 1, and then then there'll be discussions about what to do in phase 2, but there wasn't clear cut. I guess, when we spoke about this, I think a couple of weeks ago last, you said Israel needed to man, that's the way I recall, maybe you could tell me if I misremembered, that Israel needed to man this corridor to maintain security there. How do you see, and how do you address this issue? Was this always an important concern of the Israelis, or is it only more recently?
The issue, I would like to start with the disclaimer here. You don't have to be a general to understand that without being there with a certain level of control above ground and under the ground, they can smuggle, they can replenish themselves easily. It's just a matter of time and money. Money they got, they have the resources, and maybe we can say a word about it from where stuff is coming into Sinai for many years and how it gets there and how it is smuggled in. You don't have to be a general to understand that you have to be there. But to my humble opinion, it's not the question that we have to ask. What we have to ask is, should we or should we not negotiate that argument as part of the deal for the hostages? That's the big issue. And this is before, again, bringing into context all the other elements that are totally affected by that decision, which is not only Gaza. It's Gaza. Take a look at the north. Only yesterday, 65 rockets and a few UAVs, and today the same. And we didn't mention yet the residents that were uprooted from their houses, almost 100,000 that have started this year in school, which is not their school because they are in different places and they are, accruing, they are evacuated from their places. So, to my opinion, it's not a military question. It's a strategic question, and it's a matter of what kind of price we are willing to pay, if at all, in order to achieve an agreement. Assume that you have another side. I'm not sure that Sinwar is really after an agreement.
All right. Well, that's enough.
I'm not sure that he's aiming to an agreement because it's quite clear to him that once he will have an agreement with us, it will be the end of him, this way or the other. And that's why I'm not sure that this is his
why do you think
he's there?
Why do you think it will be the end of him if there's an agreement?
Because he would not have any assets, and it will be only a matter of time for the IDF and the rest of the intelligence organizations in Israel to get it, wherever he will be. And
when you say assets,
quite,
you mean hostages?
Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
This is the only reason why everything is done very carefully in the last 11 months in this area. And today there was a publication that he was trying to smuggle himself and few other higher ranks and hostages out of the Gaza Strip into Sinai, because it's quite clear to him that his end will come. So going back to your question, I think we should not see it without the broader context. And this way or the other, at the end of the day, we have to control above and under the ground of Philadelphia. Now, back to bring few facts as someone who was involved with that area in 2002, 3, and 4. People tend to forget that when we were there in those years, smuggles have happened from Egypt into Gaza. Rockets. If I checked myself today and I retrieved the numbers. In 2005, 1,000 rockets. In 2004, around 1,100 rockets, short-range rockets, were launched from the Gaza Strip, and 500 rockets were launched when we were in Gaza Strip in 2003. So it's not a clear cut here. Having said that, you have, if you want to eradicate Hamas, if you want to eliminate that threat, if we want to restore security and bring the residents back to their houses, we have to cut the lines of supplies above and under the ground. And this is a very clear issue. And without us, cutting it, they will be able to replenish themselves. I know it's a bit complicated, but this is the situation.
Oh, I appreciate that. General Amidror, let me ask you, you spent your time, if you correct me if I'm wrong, your time in the military intelligence area. Does it seem to you that the Israelis underestimated the amount of smuggling that was coming in across this border until at least the war, that there was just a lot more than they saw, and they were wondering, because it does seem that way, that they were surprised by how many tunnels they discovered along this border and so on.
I think that what was the big surprise was not the number of tunnels, but the success of smuggling in the capability to produce domestically in such numbers and qualities. I think that it was a bigger surprise. Did we have all the knowledge about the tunnels and the way they are smuggling from the Rafah passage? Probably not. But I think, from my point of view, the biggest surprise was the domestic production system that they built inside the. We knew that they have, and we attacked part of it. It was deep under the ground. This is why even when we strike them with the Air Force, we didn't succeed to stop it or to destroy it. And we had to go and to fight inside the tunnels under the ground to identify the places and to destroy them, because the Air Force couldn't reach the exact point in which the project is under the ground.
Yeah, but given how important it seems like this border, some people have raised, and it's a good question. I've raised it a different way over a number of months now. If if Rafah was so important, if this border was so important, why didn't Israel address that militarily more earlier in the war? And I know they didn't go into Rafah till May, and I know we've talked about this, and I've always been surprised why it took Israel so long, partly because of American pressure, but also I think because of IDF decision making anyway. But if it was this important of cutting off the supplies, why didn't Israel do more earlier in the war? It's as I
So
said.
my suggestion, I don't know, that should be debriefed after the war to try to understand what was the decision-making process. My view about it. First, Israel, the IDF thought that the center of gravity of the whole regime of Hamas is in the north, it's not in the south. And they want to neutralize it first. And I think that that was a right decision. Could it be done parallelly? Technically, yes. But because they wanted to move 1 million Palestinians from the north into the center south, a war in Rafah would prevent this from happening. And for the IDF to make the whole north part evacuated by the Palestinians without shooting them, just by announcing go away, because they are civilians, most of them at least. A war in the south wouldn't have allowed it to happen. The third reason is that, remember, at the beginning of the war, the IDF was not ready to commit another division, which was needed for the south, because before they knew what happening in the north, and they were very cautious, and I think it's the right way. No
North
question
of Israel, the Hezbollah threat, right?
Yeah. Yes, the Hezbollah. And there was the sensitivity of the Egyptians that didn't like the idea at all, that the friction between the IDF and Israel. And in the 2 months during which Israel waited outside, they didn't go into Rafah and the corridor. It was American pressure. The Americans told us, you cannot do it. It will be huge number of casualties. There are more than 1 million people there, and we try to convince that it is possible. And at the end of the day, Israel did it not against the American will, but without the praising of the Americans. We did it, and the number of casualties within the civilians is very, very, very little.
Yeah.
Most of them, more than 1 million, moved to the other area that was designated by the IDF. We had to bring them water and humanitarian aid and so on and so forth. So no question that the 2 months postpone of the operation, it's mainly because the Americans, not only because the Americans, the IDF need some time to prepare, but that was the issue. The Americans didn't like the idea. They're afraid that it would be a catastrophic operation. By the way, they didn't understand the situation in Rafah. They didn't understand the situation in the north. At the beginning, they say that the casualties will be, I don't know, numbers which never heard for us and for the Palestinians, and with all due respect, they didn't succeed to judge the situation if you look at it backward. And yes, Rafah was a mistake. We should do it at least 2 months earlier. And about why not to do it from the beginning, you know, I told you once, I think, that the best plan is the one which was not implemented. Yes, you can put all the good ideas on this part of the plan which was not implemented.
By the way, you know, it's been quoted. Remember, Vice President Harris said, "I've looked at the maps, you know, and we can't. Israel can't do this. It won't be able to move the Palestinian population from Rafah without, you know, problems in Israel." Of course.
Yes, but you understand, it's not her. It's the experts that should probably advise her.
Yeah,
she's not an expert for maps, and 14 kilometers, 10 miles is something that America, from this distance, no Americans can see.
What let me ask Aish, and I want to go, because look, Egypt has come up a few times already in this discussion. I want to ask both of you, but I'll start with General Aish. about this. I guess it's interesting that there's been this level of smuggling, it seems to me. The regime, I mean, the President Sisi in Egypt hates Hamas. They're the Palestinian, branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is his biggest internal concern, I believe. They're the ones who killed Sadat. Yet, despite the antipathy towards Hamas, there's been all this smuggling. Now, I've seen different explanations for it. Is it just some people close to the, families of the senior officials in Egypt that are involved in this for corruption? You think it's just corruption? You think there's something more, there's some other interest involved from the Egyptians? And they seem not
If
to.
if I may go before Aish will answer, just to say that I didn't see any research which gives the quantities separated to three groups. What was smuggled under the ground, what was smuggled from the Rafah passage, and what was domestic production. Before you have these numbers, you don't know how to measure the involvement of the Egyptians. Of course, it's different if it is from Rafah or under the ground. And so I don't know about any realistic research which give the quantities about it.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I'll come back, General Amidror. General Ayish, do you have any? I know you mentioned that there was smuggling before. This precedes President Sisi, but anyway, just there hasn't been a lot of attention, I think, or enough attention of what the Egyptian role is here. And obviously, we should clarify: Israel and Egypt have a peace treaty. They have worked together on many security matters. And it surprised me a bit also because I thought that this administration, the Biden administration, came in really with a dislike of the Egyptians, but they haven't been very critical of that, maybe because they see them as an important mediator in these talks. But anyway.
Well, but we have to remember, Mike, that we are talking here about a process of almost 15 years.
Yeah.
That this, forced buildup was made. And let me try just mention the major points. There was, at the beginning, domestically, they were trying to manufacture very basic capabilities. They were getting raw materials, which are dual use, and they have made improvised explosive and so on and so forth. And that's what they were using for quite a long time. In 2011, they got a reinforcement that came from two areas. One was a lot of Hamas supporters came from Syria because they left Syria. And they brought with them the know-how. The machinery, which is a dual-use machinery, came in, via the passage. Now, we don't have the time, but there are formally 2.5, or should I say 3 passages. One is the Kerem Shalom from the Israeli corner. The second one is the Rafah passage, and there is the Salah ad-Din passage for raw materials, cement, gravel, and all the other stuff that goes directly to Hamas. And by the way, they collect taxes over there, and they're making a lot of money out of it. This is to exclude all the other money that they are getting either from Qatar or from the Palestinian Authority for those who are dealing with their formal jobs. The third channel was made from Iran, and that channel became a major one. And we are talking about standard manufacturing of highly capable weapons such as Cornet anti-tank missiles, SA-7 ground-to-air missiles, and many other standard weapons. This stuff came from Iran to via the Red Sea to Sudan, and from Sudan it was smuggled into Egypt and across the Suez Canal into the Sinai Peninsula, and from there into the Gaza Strip above and under the ground. During the Morsi period, it came above ground. No one controlled it. Right after that, there was a twilight period, and then when Assisi came, he started to deal with the tunnels. He dealt with a few hundreds of them. But what was smuggled in was smuggled already, and it was inside. And this process continued from 2014 until today, and they literally build themselves with the workshop, small factories, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, with the support that they were getting, and I didn't mention only one major source of smuggling, which wasn't so significant, but it was part of the deal. It was from Libya. After the collapse of Libya, via the Mediterranean, fishing boats into Sinai, and either via ground or via the sea into the Gaza Strip. So they had enough sources, they had the support, they had the funds, and they had 15 years to build it. So it wasn't only exclusively via the Rafah passage as we see it, but it was a major source that allowed them to build what they built.
Okay, thank you. General Amidror, I know that you just, okay, I know he just got in, I think, from travel from abroad. So he might be, there's a, okay. Okay, I think let me ask one more thing and then we'll conclude about the, talk about the North. And I guess we've talked about the North in recent webinars a lot, but I guess given the fact the last Hezbollah attack, after Israel conducted some preemptive attacks in Lebanon, and then the Lebanese attack didn't really amount to very much. And I bet, it's been reported, maybe I've heard Israeli officials say, I think as Sinwar, most likely Hamas thought, Hezbollah would help create a regional war and maybe Iran would. Neither of them did that. They weren't rescued by either of them. Do you think right now, we all know, we've talked about this many times, the displaced people in the North, I've seen numbers 60,000 or 80,000. I don't know what the exact number, the precise number is. But do we think that given what happened in that exchange with Hezbollah, and that there hasn't really been an attack from the Iranians that was expected, at least not now.
Yet.
Yet, right. You have U.S. moved a lot of assets. Israel gave some very tough talk. They made it clear they're not going to tolerate what was before. They even talked about maybe doing preemptive actions against the Iranians. For whatever reasons, the Iranians haven't done anything yet. But do you think, at least from Hezbollah, which at least some folks thought would definitely retaliate for the killing of their number 2 by the Israelis, which was following the Hezbollah missile that went into the northern town of Israel that killed 12 kids, Druze Israelis, or Druze, I should say. Do you think that's it for now, basically, with Hezbollah? I know there's still a back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel's still attacking targets, Hezbollah is still firing things in Israel. But do you think that front is, maybe that threat is subsided for now? I'm not saying, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying it's not a threat anymore. I think we all know Israel's going to have to deal with the Hezbollah threat. But I'm talking about in the near term.
In the near term,
I apologize.
Case.
I apologize after 14 hours of flight from Los Angeles. But I want to say something about Lebanon. I think that Lebanon is now the challenge of Israel. This is the issue on which Israel will have to make the strategic decision. Do we want to continue with the same situation one way or another? We are bombing here, they are bombing there, we are killing here, they are killing here, there. Or we want to change the situation. I think that I spoke in one of these meetings about 6 elements should be considered by the decision makers. First is the military munitions, spare parts, all what is needed for a war. This is a prerequisite. If we don't have enough, don't go. Then the issue of economy. The economy in Israel is suffering a lot. The ratio of debts to GNP was raised from 60% to 70%. We don't want to reach the 75 or the 80%. We are not the United States of America, which allow himself, I don't know what is the ratio today of Washington. Israel cannot allow itself. Yes, we have huge reserve of dollars in our treasury, but we cannot do it. It will be a huge mistake. And how you do a war, a very big one with many consequences to the economy, to the home front, and so on and so forth. Question number one about economy. Third, legitimacy. Legitimacy internationally. And when we say in Israel internationally, don't tell anyone. It is between the Hill and the White House. This is the two places to which we are looking for. And of course, Europe and blah, 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 but mainly the United States of America. The fourth one is domestic legitimacy. The Israeli society is after 11 months of war with huge number of casualties, mainly in the 7th of October, not in the war in Gaza. The war in Gaza, the level of casualties is very low. Hezbollah lost 50% more of his people without moving 1 centimeter from 1 inch from the fence than Israel lost taking 85-90% of Gaza. This is the ratio that you understand the number of casualties in our side in Gaza. But domestically, the issue of legitimacy is a very big one. This government is a government in a narrow basis. The fifth issue is the IDF. The IDF is fighting long time. How is the spirit? How is the ability? What about the reserve forces to be recruited again, third or fourth or fifth time? It's a huge issue. Remember, more than half of the IDF are reserves. So the IDF ability to continue another year of war, give and take. And last but not least is the question of the homeland front. How this war will be a devastating one. We are speaking about 100,000 of rockets and missiles. Yes, they launch into Israel around 10,000 up till now, but still they have another 100,000, and they didn't use up till now the accurate systems that they have. Israel is ready to absorb those missiles, and I'm speaking about the readiness of the home front because I think it's a very different war from the Israeli point of view. Only if you have good answers and you decide as decision maker to all these 6 elements, you can make the decision about going to war in Lebanon. And I think that this is the main challenge now. Why? Because we didn't want to do it parallel to Gaza, but Gaza is coming to the end. One way or another, it will be ended. Either we will finish to dismantle Hamas, and then it will be raids and forces will go based on intelligence and so on and so forth. But it's not intensive at all. And the amount of forces that you need, the amount of air force that you need is very minimal. Anyhow, you're free to do what you have to do in Lebanon. And the decision is behind the corner. Should we do it, or we postpone it and we say we will make all the preparations in the next 2 years, and the one who will be prime minister in 2 years from now, we have to make a decision.
General Amidror, just real quickly, and first of all, I did say I do appreciate. I know you just got back from a trip to see.
Yes, I landed 2 hours ago.
Oh, that didn't okay. I didn't realize it was that close, and I appreciate your diligence in participating. I know I gather you had a great trip, seeing some of the beauty of the American West, and there's plenty of that there. So one last thing just on that, and then let's stop. I heard that you laid out very important criteria for Israel to make a decision. Do you feel, let's just say for the sake of argument, that you talked about maybe 2 years, possibly. I mean, I know you were just throwing out a number, But do you suggest that? Are you suggesting, at least in the near term, given that the exchange that Israel and Hezbollah had recently, that maybe that the Northern Front, well, that it will be on a lower burn now for a little while? I mean, there'll still be an exchange, but Hezbollah showed this is as much they're going to do now after the killing of their number two, and Israel will keep attacking folks there, but it will be a relatively lower burn than compared to maybe what we saw before. For the
Here, I think
short
that
term,
if I can quote General Ayish, it's not a military question. It's a political one. The main problem of Israel is not the military side. We are handling the Hezbollah very well. We lost, I don't know the exact number, they lost almost
over 500. Over 500.
Over 500. And if you take other organizations' casualties, it's close to 600. And we lost, I think, around 30 people up to now, if you add with 12 children, which is unbelievable massacre of children which are not related to the war at all. A Druze settlement in the Golan Heights. And
they're Syrian. Yeah.
And part of them are Syrian citizens, yes. But all of them are living in Israel.
Right.
So it's around 40. Militarily, this is not the issue. Militarily, we are doing very well versus Hezbollah. And the last example is how we succeeded to intercept in time and to prevent them from reaction by attack which was very precise on the places from which they planned to attack Israel. And it was a huge success. Very well measured, not to lead to a big war, but at the same time preventing almost totally their ability to react. This is not the problem. The problem are the people that General Ayish spoke about. It's formally, I think it's close to 100,000. I think that practically it's probably more. People which had been evacuated formally by the government or evacuated themselves because of the situation. And for that, we don't have a good solution. In the South, in a way, it was easier. It was clear from the beginning, okay, we are going to a war, and at the end of the war, all of them will come. Now, how long can they stay out? Their houses, the buildings, the schools, whatever they had in the North. Yeah. Unlike the South, in which it was devastating situation the 7th of October. But from the time that we decided to maneuver inside Gaza, it was clear we will do it. It will take, some people say 6 months, some people say 8 months. If I remember well, I said in one of our meetings that it will be between 6 and 12. And now, 1st of September, 85% of the population of the settlements around Gaza are back at home. We don't have any schedule for the North. This is the problem. This is the burden that they have, the decision makers in Jerusalem have. And they have to make here a decision, which I don't envy them, they have to do.
Yeah. I know, I appreciate it. Thank you, General Amidror. General Ayish, I think, first of all, I again want to thank General Amidror for participating after he literally just got off the plane back in Israel. So thank you.
I didn't pack my suitcase are still packed in the other room.
I appreciate that.
Maybe my wife is doing the job now.
We'll conclude with General Amidror. General Ayish, maybe just for you have a concluding thought for a remaining minute, and then we'll.
Yeah, I'll say I'll mention 4 points. 2 regarding Gaza and 2 regarding the North. And everything is subjected to either an agreement vis-a-vis the hostages, as we discussed at the beginning. I think the humanitarian factor is going to be a key factor in the near term in Gaza. And the second one is alternative administration in Gaza. These are the 2 factors that we are going to discuss over here and are going to affect significantly the situation in Gaza after we will have, hopefully soon, an agreement regarding the hostages. In the North, Hezbollah and neither us want a full-scale war. However, I'm not sure it's really up to us. The situation dictates one thing which is very clear. It's a decision. It's an unbearable situation when you are thinking about the residents. And I think this decision is imminent, is very soon. And we are going to see things unfold very soon about that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, General Ayish. Thank you again, General Amidror. I thank everybody for joining us today, and obviously certainly on a tough week in Israel.
Very tough.
And very tough.
Very.
Probably the worst since October 7th, I gather. We didn't get to the issue of Israeli society. We are going to talk about it. We're going to have a conversation with Natan Sharansky again. We've had a couple with him already since this war began. We're going to have one Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. We're also going to have a discussion with General Frank McKenzie on Wednesday next week, although that is not going to be per se about what's going on, but I assume we're going to talk about what's been going on in Gaza and in the north with Hezbollah and so on, but we're going to discuss his book. General McKenzie, the previous CENTCOM commander, is a distinguished fellow with JINSA. So I hope many you all will join us for those webinars next week, along with our normal weekly one. And again, thank you very much, General Ayish and General Amidror. I wish everybody a good rest of the week.
Thank you. לילה טוב, עמידרור.
Thank you.
לילה טוב. לילה טוב.
להתראות, ערב טוב.
תודה.